My name is Heather Cox Richardson. I am a professor of history, but I do not speak for my employer when I do these videos. So welcome back to this unending saga that seems to be the 2020 American presidential election, about which you had a lot of questions that I will do my best to answer. Although I feel like I don't have anything hugely significant to say today, although that maybe means that there's some stuff I can add. So let me start here with some of the questions you people asked, more specifically about politics, and then I'm going to go ahead. Ooh, someone just baked cinnamon rolls. I finish teaching tomorrow, so I'm a little loopy. Anyway, so let me answer some of the specific questions you had about where we are. And let me just start by saying something that I hope I will pick up on in just a minute. And that is that people are really, really reacting fast and hard to the newest thing that's in the news constantly. And I would urge you to center down a little bit, because there's a lot of chaff flying around that doesn't matter. And that literally, I try and look at things as what will show up in the history books. And a lot of the stuff that's out there right now is not going to show up in the history books, except in that monograph that somebody's going to get a doctorate writing, that's going to sit on a shelf and be really an important book for the people who study legal machinations around elections, but that most of us really are not going to care about. So one of the things that people are asking about, first of all, is that today the Attorney General from Texas, a guy named Paxton, has gone ahead and he has tried to sue under to take to the Supreme Court an argument that the states of Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and Pennsylvania have to throw out their election results because their votes impinge on the rights of Texans to go ahead and have Trump be in office. And it's a frivolous lawsuit. And I'm not a lawyer, by the way. This is what I have read about it. And that it really doesn't have a chance of going anywhere. So people are really worried about it, really upset about it. And the reality is that it doesn't even appear that Texas has standing to sue. So one of the things that means is that you can't bring a lawsuit unless you have standing. That is, unless there's some reason that this particular issue involves you. And Texas has no say over what Michigan does, for example. So what's really going on with Paxton and with what's happening there in Texas? And then there's a larger question about what's happening with this election, of course. But in this particular case, it appears that what Paxton is up to is that this is a public relations stunt. And the reason that he's doing it is because he himself is under investigation by the FBI, and he has been in trouble with abuse of power, with the idea that he has used his office in order to help a political donor. And it looks to observers as if he is trying to use this particular, as I say, public relations stunt in order to see if he can get some kind of a pardon out of Trump for the trouble he's in with the FBI right now. So instantly, the Michigan Attorney General, a person named Dana Nessel, said, and I quote, "The motion filed by the Texas Attorney General is a publicity stunt, not a serious legal pleading. The erosion of confidence in our democratic system isn't attributable to the good people of Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, or Pennsylvania, but rather to partisan officials like Mr. Paxton, who place loyalty to a person over loyalty to their country. The Michigan issues raised in this complaint have already been thoroughly litigated and roundly rejected in both state and federal courts by judges appointed from both political parties. Mr. Paxton's actions are beneath the dignity of the Office of Attorney General and the people of the great state of Texas." And that's a quote from a statement from the Michigan Attorney General. Again, it looks like this is simply one of the many public relations kind of suits that the supporters of the Trump administration have been filing. And as I keep saying, and I don't really want to like beat this with a dead horse, beat the whole dead horse thing here. first of all, they have lost 49 out of 50 cases, and the one that they won, I believe, was procedural. They were not. They were in fact allowed to be standing closer to the counting of the votes than the election officials permitted the Republican observers to be standing. I think that's what that was about. It was an equivalent level of something like that. It was not going to change votes. It was not a big deal. And they've lost 49. And the piece that people like me keep saying is that when people are alleging irregularities in the 2020 election, they're not doing so under oath. That's really important to remember. And when the lawyers go in front of the courtroom and they are in fact in danger of bearing penalties for lying, they won't make those same allegations. They will bring a lawsuit saying, there were no Republican observers here. And then when the judge says, are you saying there are no Republican observers? They'll say, well, what was the language? There was not a zero account number. I mean, it was something like that. They're not willing to take the risk of lying to a court of law. So this is why they keep the judges from Republicans appointed and Democratic appointed judges keep throwing these cases out and saying, you guys don't have any evidence. It's one of the cleanest elections we've seen, at least in terms of the votes that were actually delivered. I, as a historian, have real doubts about how many votes were suppressed in places like Texas, where, as you probably remember, they closed, for example, drop boxes and made it so that in one county in Texas, which was, a huge state, a huge county, similar to the size of the state of Rhode Island, there was only a single drop box for ballots. So, you look at places like that, you look at things that happen on indigenous reservations where you have to have for example, a specific location and a street address in order to vote. And if you're in a reservation, you don't have those, that suppresses votes. I mean, that's voter suppression, as I'm just taking that out of this equation. The election as it happened was secure. So what you are seeing with all this flack or this chaff is simply an attempt to convince people who are willing to be convinced that Joe Biden did not win this election. It is cynical. It is anti-democratic. It is anti-American. It is a public relations campaign. It is sheerly advertising. So every time you see one of these, don't react the way that you did over, for example, this Paxton thing, because literally in 100 years, somebody's going to go, who the heck is Paxton? Why did this matter? And don't let people do that to your blood pressure, because this is a game that they are playing and you do not have to play along. So why do I say that? Well, first of all, because the Republicans are losing in one court after another. And second of all, because today was the safe harbor deadline. And the safe harbor deadline is the deadline by which a state must certify its election results in order to have it guaranteed to go that way in front of the Electoral College. And as of today, I believe it's every state with the exception of Wisconsin, which is counting again, and which are electoral votes that Biden does not need. Every single state has certified its election results. And each state does that differently. Sometimes it's the Secretary of State, sometimes it's committee, whatever. But those are all in by this safe harbor deadline. And what that says is the safe harbor deadline is set up in case there is some kind of real major confusion over how an election went. And that simply wasn't the case here. These in state after state, the election results have been litigated and relitigated, and the Trump people have lost again and again and again because they had no evidence. There was nothing untoward. And what you're seeing on Facebook, this whole thing about the suitcases of ballots, again, that was all on videotape, and it was all the way that the counting was supposed to go. Like everything that they have pulled out and tried to say, oh, there's this terrible thing going on, that is false. It's a lie. Similarly, there's a bunch of stuff going around from QAnon that Barack Obama has been arrested and that Joe Biden has an ankle bracelet on, and they're all going to be going to prison because Trump is going ahead and rounding up everybody. I just can't even touch that. I guess I have to say that's a lie. But every time you hear something like that, I would urge you to game it out in your head. Like, what would that look like? what would it look like for Barack Obama to be arrested in such a way that no word of it would get out at all from anybody? No, so that means he's got to be taken out of a place where there are people on the street who certainly know who he is. That would involve everybody keeping their mouths shut. That would involve, you know, think of all the people that have to be involved in something and all the cameras we have in the modern world and all those things, and think of what it would take and recognize that, you know, Q is running the biggest scam in American history anyway. All right, so that is Paxton, and that is safe harbor. So that raises this next question of why is I'm actually trying to look things here. Yeah, so somebody just asked, and maybe you saw I put this on Twitter. Somebody just asked, did Buddy see the boats from North Korea that were theoretically brought into Maine harbors? And I actually put on Twitter, this is insane, because I'm from the coast of Maine. We know everything. There's only 1 million people in this state. We know everything that happens on the coastline. And believe me, I know that everything I am implying with that is not a secret in small towns. So all right, so so that's Paxton, and that's safe harbor. So again, so here's the next question though: what's going on? Like what is going on? Why is the Republican leadership refusing to acknowledge that Biden has won this election? Because he has won this election, and he's won this election by a lot, more than 7 million votes and 306 electoral college votes to 232 for Trump. When Trump got 306 electoral votes in 2016, well, he lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. Trump considered that a mandate. He said he had won a landslide. Now, Biden's gotten 10 million more votes than him and won the Electoral College by the same amount. And suddenly this is illegitimate, according to the Republicans. What's going on? Why are they doing this? They are doing it for a couple of reasons, I think. First of all, because they are eager not to alienate Trump voters. They're feeding them what they want to hear because they are eager to make sure that especially the Senate does not turn to the Democrats in 2022 when the Republicans have a really bad Senate map to try and fight in 2022, because remember, the Senate turns over a third every 6 years, so that you know it's kind of random who's going to be up every 2 years in the Senate. And it just happens that in 2022, there's a number of Republican senators whose seats are endangered. So they want to make sure they can hold on to the Trumpers because they need them. They need those votes. So that is part of what's going on. There's also the issue going on that that right now, and this is actually something interesting to pay attention to. Right now, it's not clear who's going to control the Republican National Committee. Is it going to be Trump and his support and his handpicked people running it, the way Ronna McDaniel began to run it for Trump? She's trying now to be somewhat independent, even though she actually changed her name for him. She's a Romney, but she stopped using the Romney and started using McDaniel because he didn't want to be associated with Romney. Now she's trying to look more independent. So it's not clear whether Trump is going to continue to control the RNC, the Republican National Committee, or whether it's going to become more independent again. If he continues to control it, he's going to control the purse strings. He's going to control the money. And one of the things that's happened with these challenges to the election, of course, is that Trump has been raising money off of them. And as of last week, he'd raised $207 million based on the idea that he had been cheated of the election and he was going to challenge those things in court. And obviously that he hasn't spent anywhere near $207 million on these election challenges that have gone nowhere. So that begs the question of where is that money going to go? And at least some of the money has been going into the Republican National Committee, which again, he would go ahead and control if he stays in control of the Republican National Committee. And he's not going to be giving that money to Republicans who don't support him. And this is one of the interesting things to be watching, is the fight within the Republican Party. And maybe I'll talk more about that in a minute. All right, so they're eager to keep Trump voters. They're eager to keep Trump money. But here's the piece that I am increasingly watching, and I wrote about this within the last few days, and that is that it's really hard to look where we are right now and what the Republicans are doing and not think that they are deliberately trying to sabotage Joe Biden's administration by just even the stupid things like I will probably write about tonight, like the Congressional Committee on Inaugural Events. That's not what it's called. They refuse to recognize that Biden has won. So his inaugural team can't work with Congress the way it's supposed to do. So literally, they're trying to do all this by themselves without the kind of institutional support that every other president has gotten. And just petty crap like that is, I think, really designed to keep him constantly back on the ropes. And while the inaugural committee is a bit of a petty and in a way, who cares, especially in a time when it's going to be virtual. It's a nasty thing to do, but it really matters in things like the stopping of the coronavirus, where Biden has not been given access to the information about distribution of vaccines. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but certainly it matters in terms of a coronavirus relief package. I mean, quite literally, Mitch McConnell refusing to negotiate over even the $809 billion package. The Democrats have said, fine, whatever, we just need to get money in people's pockets. He's now refusing to negotiate over that. That is literally going to really exacerbate everything. I mean, it's going to exacerbate the recession. It's going to exacerbate unemployment. It's going to exacerbate hunger. And it's certainly going to exacerbate the coronavirus, because people are going to have to be out in groups of people and trying to find jobs in order simply to eat, which is going to be more important in the short term than worrying about this disease, which is such a deadly disease. So there is that. And there is also, of course, the fact that as of the last I have heard, although the Trump administration has denied this, I have not seen any evidence to the contrary. The Trump administration is refusing to give Joe Biden and his people access to the intelligence committees at the Pentagon. He can see them in the executive branch, the FBI and the CIA, but he has not been able to communicate with the biggest of our intelligence agencies. And considering that most of or many of what his Secretary of State will need to do, and a lot of what a president does, is to figure out our relationship in the world, that's a real biggie. So partly I think they are simply trying to sabotage Biden. Now, the next step to me, and the things that sort of keep me awake at night, is to what end? Like, to what end is a political party trying to destroy its rival simply to say we are desperate to take back over power? Now, are they trying to do that to take back over power to do good things for the country? Or are they trying to take over power to do good things for a small minority of people, probably people of, well, not even probably, people of wealth? I look at this and I say, this is not just an attack on Joe Biden. And it's not just an attack on the people who voted for Joe Biden. This is an attack on American democracy. And that, to me, is the big story here, not what kind of machinations that this attorney general who's under investigation by the FBI in Texas is trying to get up to with this stupid lawsuit that's probably never going to go anywhere. My bigger story is the one that is kind of out in the open and therefore under the radar, which is what the Republican lawmakers, especially the Senate lawmakers, are doing. And what they are doing is not okay. And that's one of the things that is the theme really of the last 4 years. Every time people get mad at Trump and say, why aren't people holding him responsible? Why isn't he going to jail? Why, he's breaking the law quite openly. Why is this okay? It's okay because the Senate says it's okay. The Senate, even just 4 senators, could stop him at any time they wanted to, and they have not done so. And this is from the time of impeachment, for sure, which is the remedy in the Constitution for a president who is committing high crimes and misdemeanors, which, as you remember, the Republican Senate refused even to hear testimony about what Trump had done. But it could also do so by putting pressure on him in any number of ways, and they are refusing to do so. So when you're thinking about this era, it's worth thinking about the true conspiracy here, which is not, a group of pedophile cannibals who live in a pizza parlor. It's the Senate, which is refusing to adhere to our Constitution and to our laws. And that literally is, to me, the story of this moment, and why I get so so angry about Mitch McConnell, among other people, and the senators who permit this to happen. And again, there's plenty of good senators who are doing all they can to make sure it doesn't happen. But that rump block of Republicans who's enabling Trump is, to my mind, appalling. So people have asked me about this, and I saw it just flying by here. That is treason. Why isn't anybody accusing these people of treason? And that's a really interesting point that is maybe worth digging into a little bit here, because having done interviews all day, I'm like wired, so I'm talking really quickly, and I will try to slow down because people have complained about that. Treason in America is very, very rare and very carefully protected, and you want it to be. And the answer for that is that in order to commit treason, you need to conspire with, to give aid and comfort to an enemy. Well, what's an enemy? You know, an enemy so far has been considered a foreign person, a foreign group of people. Or, I mean, but it's a little fuzzy, because what we really had in the early 19th century was treason against states and not against the federal government. And you really kind of want to keep those limits, because once you start to say that somebody speaking out, for example, is treason, it's a pretty slippery slope. Usually if people are acting in ways that are not good for the country, there's plenty of other things to get them on, because, you know, it's pretty rare that you're squeaky clean in every other way and then you're suddenly trying to overthrow the government. And you really want to be careful about what the government can define as treason. So interestingly enough, although we do have the concept of treason in our Constitution, it is never defined as, it's never very thoroughly defined, and there's no punishment that is specified for treason. It's not a good thing to do, but we have this idea that treason is punishable by death in America, but it was not until 1859. It's actually the state of Virginia that considers treason punishable by death, and they hang John Brown, and he's the first person in America executed for treason, and he's executed for treason against the state of Virginia, which is one of the reasons that the Civil War gets so ferocious, is that many Southerners feel that, having defined treason as punishable by death, that now all the Southerners who are literally trying to make war on the United States government are in danger of being hanged themselves. And this is one of the reasons that Lincoln is always sort of going, no, I'm going to be generous, I'm going to be kind, because he doesn't want people to feel that they have to fight to the death, because they will be hang themselves. So the reason we don't talk a lot about treason, and the reason treason has such walls around it, is because, you know, again, how do you define an enemy? And you see the problem that this raised for Obama, with the idea that we have not declared war. Congress has not declared war against an enemy since, I believe, World War II. Since then, we have been in what we consider police actions, or different, they're defined in different ways. So if you remember, you may not, Obama had the problem of an American citizen who was actively working with a foreign terrorist organization, but we have not declared war on non-state actors. So that was very difficult for him, and he had to have a committee of people to decide whether or not it was okay to take this person out, and he ended up doing so, but it was really fraught with legal implications. And in fact, I wrote against that the government should not, under any circumstances, declare that it can kill a citizen under those circumstances. I actually wrote a piece against Obama doing that, although I certainly understood why the government did not want to leave this guy out there killing Americans. He'd been making recruitment videos for one of the major terrorist organizations. But that idea that your government can say, oh, you are a terrorist, I'm going to take you out, seemed to me to be part of a slippery slope. And similarly, we have a problem nowadays with the assassinations of Soleimani in Iran, and more recently, the man who was assassinated apparently by Israeli operatives recently. And there was a huge outcry against that, and a lot of people on the right said, these are bad actors, we don't care. And And a number of people who work in foreign affairs said, you can't do that. You can't simply go and declare that somebody who is a member of a state with which we are not at war, as we are not at war with Iran currently. You can't simply go into their countries and assassinate them. That's not that's not playing by the rules. So that actual declaration of war, the acknowledgement that we are at war, matters. And right now, we are not at war with somebody that we could literally say that the president is working for that person. So treason, that people keep saying, why can't you get Trump for treason? It's because of that important, really important legal and philosophical difference. And again, it's one that I'm really quite comfortable with. Because I think that when you give your government the ability to decide who is treasonous and who is not, you think it's a lovely thing when you think of the government being in charge of being run by people you like. But what happens if it's your enemies? Because I promise you, there's plenty of leaders that you could put in the presidency right now who would tell you I am treasonous. And I'm not, I don't think, but I would much rather have to have anybody who wanted to go after me operate through our legal system rather than simply declare that people like me are treasonous. All right, so that's what's going on with treason. Now, people have asked questions about what happens if the 2 seats in Georgia go to Democrats and the Senate count in between party goes to 50-50 Democrats and Republicans. What happens to Mitch McConnell? Well, that's a really interesting question. And one of the things that I want to emphasize here, people kept talking before the election of trying to get McConnell thrown out in Kentucky, which was always going to be a heavy lift because he's been there since like 1400. And yes, I'm exaggerating, but he's incumbents have the power of incumbency. People are just used to them. But a majority leader is literally the leader of the party that is in the majority. So Mitch McConnell has been elected the leader of the majority in the Senate because the Senate is controlled by Republicans. So if in fact if there were a majority of Democrats, then a Democrat would be the leader. Not necessarily Chuck Schumer, although possibly. There's usually a real competition for the Senate leadership, as there is for the House leadership, because you determine who's on committees, among other things, and you crucially determine the calendar. And that's, of course, why McConnell can silence so many bills. He simply doesn't put them on the calendar. It's not like he, goes into a back room and tears them up. He simply says, we're not going to talk about that. And because he is the majority leader, he has the power to do that. So if the Senate is divided 50-50, because of, and I think I talked about the other day, the Senate's a really funny place. It needs to have its rules sort of updated because for so long it was really clubby and they didn't have the kind of guardrails that were put into the House of Representatives. If the Senate is even 50-50, the majority leadership goes to the member of the party who is in the White House. So the Democrats in that case would in fact have the majority, and they would appoint a majority leader if in fact the 2 Senate candidates in Georgia go to the Democratic candidates there, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, who are running against incumbents, one of whom was appointed, and both of whom are in real trouble for insider trading. So it's going to be a very interesting election down there. So that's what happens with that. All right. A couple more questions here. You've asked about the vaccines, and I think this is a really interesting question. So the whole process of getting vaccines for this coronavirus is, let me just start by saying, I'm going to give you a political answer to this because I'm a political historian. I do what my doctor tells me, and I read science because it interests me, but believe me, if you're coming to me for medical advice, your next stop is the emergency room. I mean, I have no qualifications at all. So I'm going to tell you what it looks like to me from a political standpoint. And I will also once again reiterate that I absolutely trust my doctors. If they tell me to jump, I say how high. So this is not a question of me in any way going up against science. I trust what they tell me. And by the way, I have to point out here that the person that Biden is putting in charge of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, that doctor is incredibly well regarded, and she is at MGH, Mass General Hospital, which is a flagship hospital in Boston, and she's also at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And Brigham and Women's was a combination of the Peter Bent Brigham Hospital and the Women's Lying In Hospital, and that's how it became Brigham and Women's. And a lot of people think it is a hospital for women, and it's actually a hospital for everybody, and it is crackerjack. They are the hospital I've always gone to in Boston, where I had all my children, and they are just, where all my doctors are, they are just phenomenal. And the fact that they've got someone from Brigham and Women's there, I'm like, yes. So anyway, all that to say that I am not going to tell you anything medical here, but I'm going to take a look at what it looks like to me politically about this story that broke yesterday, that Trump and the administration did not buy additional Pfizer vaccines when they had the opportunity to do so. And what I'm going to say is odd, I think, probably for a lot of people coming from me. And I have spent a lot of time reading about this stuff because it doesn't make sense to me. And what doesn't make sense to me is that I'm not at all sure that the administration made a mistake in that the Trump administration invested in a number of vaccines. And remember, the scientists have produced this vaccine in an unbelievable amount of time. Like we're sort of all like, I don't know, sort of saying, well, yeah, we want to get it quickly and all that. But it's worth stepping back and saying it is a freaking miracle that they managed to create this vaccine in under a year. I mean, vaccines usually take 2 years minimum, and they produce this sucker, which is, first of all, we should just bow down to the epidemiologists and the vaccine people who managed to do this. So this is no small thing. But that being said, it was not clear that who was going to come up with one from the beginning. I mean, maybe it was clear to epidemiologists. It certainly wasn't clear to those of us on the ground. And I doubt it was clear to anybody in the Trump administration who was going to come up with the right vaccine quickly. So they spread the money around, which again looks, nowadays people are saying, well, Pfizer had the vaccine. I'm not sure it was clear that Pfizer was the one who was going to come through. And what it looks like to me anyway, is that the Trump administration put money into Pfizer. They also put money into Moderna and a number of other things as well. But Moderna also has a vaccine that is as productive, as good as the, appears to be, from what I read, as good as the Pfizer vaccine. And it doesn't have to be refrigerated at super low temperatures, which is going to make distributing it a lot easier, because those are super cool, super cold freezers that not a lot of states have. And they're trying to produce refrigerated units as quickly as they can, but that's one more thing that they have to get up and running. And one of the things that bothered me today in the news that I saw, and mind you, again, this is just, it doesn't make sense to me, is a lot of people are sort of implying that it was the administration's decision not to buy more vaccines from Pfizer. And mind you, it's not Pfizer that developed the vaccine, it's Pfizer that's distributing it. It was developed in Germany, so it's a German vaccine. But is that they're getting that, they're already giving people those shots in the UK, and we're not getting them here in America yet. But I don't think that has anything to do with how many doses are available. I believe that that's because the FDA has not yet approved either the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine or any of the others that are in the pipeline. So here's what I don't understand. People are asking me, wasn't this crazy? And there's articles everywhere going, darn Trump for not having bought more of these Pfizer vaccines, and maybe so. But I don't think that's the current bottleneck. I think what people are looking is down the road in the second quarter, are there going to be enough vaccines? And what the administration has said is, yeah, there are, because we're going to have the Moderna vaccine with luck. I mean, right now, none of these have been approved in America, unless something's happened today. I've been busy all day. And then we have all these others as well that look promising, and who knows what's going to happen with them. So here's what I don't understand is that, so I think people are confusing the FDA approval, which is taking longer than the UK approval did, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I say, this is not, I can only tell you what's happening. I can't judge this. I'm not a scientist. But I think they're confusing the FDA approval with the fact that Trump didn't buy more of the Pfizer vaccines. And I just don't think it's the same thing to me. I mean, I think fairly logically, and they seem to me to be two largely unrelated issues, aside from the fact they both have to do with coronavirus and the vaccine. Now, maybe somebody will correct me and tell me that I've got this entirely wrong, because here's the piece that I don't get. If in fact I'm right, and this actually does not make the Trump administration look bad, why the heck aren't they out there saying it? I mean, I just explained it to you what I see, and again, I could be wrong, but instead, why is Trump doing this executive order that's just frankly fairly stupid, that says I'm going to make Americans getting the vaccine a priority rather than having it sent it somewhere else? That's not the current problem. The problem is not that anybody's in danger of sending the vaccine somewhere else. The problem is we're in danger of not getting it. And the only other thing that might be is a dog whistle to people who don't want America to be part of the organization, which we are not currently a part of, that says that we have to make sure that poorer countries get the vaccine at the same time that richer countries do. And that means that everybody's going to have to wait a little bit longer. Maybe that's a dog whistle to them, but I don't understand. I don't quite understand why there seem to be three separate issues that are getting mushed together. And maybe it's that I don't understand, and we're going to have to take this video down because somebody's going to say you're an idiot. You missed this whole point. But so I'm not. People are like, why didn't Trump buy more vaccines? I don't. It is not clear to me yet that the strategy of spreading out putting a lot of eggs in a lot of baskets was not as effective as, at the time anyway, as of putting all the eggs in the Pfizer basket. And it's also not clear to me, considering that our country is big and rural, and we're going to have problems with the temperature issue for the Pfizer vaccine, that that's a bad plan here. But if I'm right, why the heck isn't he saying so? So I could be entirely wrong. I hope you appreciate that I am sort of talking this one like this is not my area of expertise, and I'm trusting you guys to recognize that I could be wrong. But you asked me what I thought about what Trump was doing, and I saw that there was a lot of people upset about it. That's the best I got. So so I could be wrong, and check the notes. Maybe somebody else has something else. All right, so other questions about where we are right now. So people have asked again and again, are we in the middle of a military coup? And is that what's going on with Trump's changes in the personnel at the Department of Defense, in the Pentagon? And what's happened there is over the last, well, really since the election, Trump, as you know, fired Mark Esper, who was his fourth, I believe, Secretary of Defense, and he replaced him with an acting fellow who is only acting. I mean, he's never going to go through Senate approval, even though he's supposed to. And that person in turn went ahead and purged a lot of people from a lot of different positions, both in the actual Department of Defense, in the Pentagon, and then also in two advisory boards. One, the Policy Advisory Board, which is made up of people from all different parties and all different kind of experience levels. So that if, in fact, the Secretary of Defense wanted to have advice about how to interact with some country, he or she could go to the Defense Policy Board and say, hey, Madeleine Albright, you were Secretary of State. What has been your experience with the leader of wherever, Bhutan? I'm making it up. Or Henry Kissinger, who was also on that board. What do you think about this? And then the Secretary of Defense would think about those things. It was almost kind of a cabinet for him or her, if you will, although it's obviously not called that. And they did not have any official, it wasn't like anything had to go by them. It was just kind of a group of people who had been vetted and invited to be tapped to be as an advisory board for policy. So they made a bunch of changes in the policy board, replacing the people there with Trump cronies. And then they also did a similar purge in the business board, which off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of it. The defense had to do with defense contracting, and they made a huge bunch of changes on that. They threw out the chair, and they threw out I want to say it was 9 out of 13 people. It was a lot of people. And again, these are changes that lots of people didn't pay attention to, but the question is what's going on there is in fact there's going to be a military coup, especially considering the fact that one of the things these changes did is it meant that the special ops part of our law enforcement teams, or I'm sorry, our military teams, that's about 70,000 people, and they now report directly to a Trump appointee, and from that Trump appointee to the acting Secretary of Defense that Trump has just appointed. And that's somewhat worrisome. I mean, I had no idea special ops was so big. I don't know if you did, but special ops are the people who do, well, special ops. They are involved in covert activities, intelligence activities. They're the people who operate in ways that are not sort of, how to put this, on the table with troops moving around. So the fact that they are now overseen by this group of Trump cronies is concerning. And what is going on there? There's a lot of concern about. Instantly when this happened, a lot of people said, "Oh, he's planning to launch a coup in the streets," and there's a lot of concern that this is what's going on. And I don't think that's the case personally. And again, I'm only one person, and I absolutely could be wrong. But I don't think he's launching a military coup for 2 reasons. One, because the military last summer came out and said they wanted no part of a military coup. And that was not a small deal when they did that. That was shortly after the Bible photo op, when the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, actually was, and Mark Esper as well, actually were out with Trump on that walk, and then they took a ton of flack from it. And they said, no, we're not part of a coup effort here. That was inadvertent. We didn't know that was going to happen. And both Milley and Esper came out quickly and said, this, the military has taken an oath to the Constitution, and we will live by the Constitution. And Milley reiterated that within the last week. And what that was, both what Milley and Esper did, and then what so many leaders of so many different branches of the service did after that. If you remember, there's about 2 weeks when there was one announcement after another that, the head of, and I'm not going to give you terms because I don't remember now which ones they were, but the head of different military organizations, from the Navy to the special people here to, there's a whole bunch of declarations of people saying, we believe in the Constitution. We are not going to be part of any attempt to subvert the Constitution. And what they were doing was sending a really clear message that there was not going to be a military coup in America. And that was a huge deal. If I had to say that there was one big thing that happened in the last really almost 4 years, and I wouldn't say that because whatever, in the last year, it would be that the military came out and made that statement, because if they hadn't, that would have been on the table. People would have been like, which way is the military going to jump? And they were very clear that they were not going to jump behind any kind of a military coup. So that really mattered. The other reason that I don't think that that Trump is trying to stage a military coup, there's actually 2 more reasons. First of all, is the man is lazy. And, you can't forget that. He is lazy. And a military coup takes a lot of work. There's going to be fighting. He's got to be up all night. He can't watch TV. It actually takes a lot of work. And I don't think he's up for that kind of work. I think he's up for causing as much trouble as he possibly can in these waning days of his presidency. But I don't think he's up for something that's going to take a lot of effort, and just because of who he is. And the other thing that I think of when I look at the changes in defense is, why there? Why the board that looks at military contracting? Like, if you're trying to launch a coup, that's not where you're going. You don't care about military contracting. So when I look at what's going on, I am way more ready to look at where military contracts are going, because there's a ton of money operating over there. In the Pentagon. I mean, that is our biggest budget, right? So the fact that there are now Trump cronies in policy and in the board that oversees contracting and at the head of defense, I look at those things and I think this is about money. which is always a safe bet when you're dealing with Trump anyway, that you're looking at issues of money. And so I think that this is probably an attempt to make sure that a couple of things happen, like, for example, the sale of that $23 billion worth of equipment to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, despite their close ties to both Russia and China, who will probably get their hands on that defense, including our F-35 planes, which are the best of the best, and where there will almost certainly be a kickback. And to my mind, I mean, again, I'm just guessing here, or the piece that I just think you cannot look away from, and I just can't believe how little attention it's gotten. So maybe I'm off base, but the attempt of a private company to lease the spectrum that the military owns, it doesn't, I mean, it controls the broadband spectrum, and turn that into a private enterprise, which is a move that has been opposed by the Pentagon. And certainly opposed by members of both parties in Congress, because it is not at all clear that the company that wants to do that, a company called Rivada, is going to be able to maintain the security of the defense channels if, in fact, it's also using that same broadband for commercial purposes. I think that Rivada issue and the broadband spectrum issue is a really huge one, because guess how much that sucker is worth? That is worth between 50 and 100 billion dollars. If that spectrum gets leased to a private company, it's going to be the future of 5G technology. And the fact that that kind of a money-making opportunity is sitting over there at defense right at a time when we know that the Trump family is going to be in really big trouble for money when he leaves office, just strikes me as being, that's what's really going on at defense, far more than the attempt at a military coup. But there's also the possibility that Trump would really like to see another strike at Iran. I think that is certainly something that I am watching. But I think he's lazy, and it's going to come down to money, is my bottom line on that. Same thing. Somebody just asked here about troop withdrawals. Yeah, I think the same thing is true of troop withdrawals as well, that there is money involved. And exactly how and where that money is involved, I'm not sure yet. There's certainly rumors about private mercenaries, or certainly it benefits the other countries who want to see NATO destabilized. So I think that's probably, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you always have to figure on money mattering to somebody like Trump. So the other issue that does bring up that I want to emphasize here is the fact that you cannot ignore, with the withdrawal of troops and with what Trump has done in his 4 years in office, is the extraordinary destabilization of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And that is the organization that has brought stability to America and Europe, and really the Western world since World War II. And it's something that Putin, especially in Russia, has been eager to destabilize, and Trump's handed that to him. So so that's what I have to say about this. People are asking some other things about whether this is the craziest time we've ever been in America. It is certainly a unique time in American history, and that may be a good place for me to go now with the rest of this today. Somebody asked if the founders magically reappeared today, how seriously should we take what they have to say? And I think that's a really good question for right now, because we are in a period in which we are really reevaluating the very concept of American democracy. And the central question is it even viable? I mean, that was the question that George Washington had. He called it the Great Experiment. And is it viable for a group of ordinary people to try and organize a government that can govern them all? Is that even possible to do? And You could say that other countries at this point have proved that that is the case. America was the country in 1776 who said, yeah, we can do it. And they put together a constitution in 1787 that said, here are the rules by which we're going to do it. But buried in that early constitution, of course, was the very concept of inequality to go along with the idea of equality. So it's really kind of been a central question. Is it possible for ordinary people to govern themselves? And right now in America, it looks like the answer is no. I mean, literally, we started here with the Attorney General of Texas saying that he wanted to overturn the votes in 4 other states because he wanted things his way. But the founders, for all of their weaknesses, had an idea. And that idea was that it was possible for ordinary people to govern themselves. And one of the things that they did not grapple with, and that we are finally grappling with, is the idea that that concept of people being able to govern themselves can be expanded way beyond white men. And what we have the potential right now to do is to create really a multicultural democracy, a democracy that includes people of all abilities, people of all genders, people of all races, people of all ethnicities, people of all levels of wealth, because we share that same belief in a concept of human self-determination. And so if the founders reappeared right now, should we listen to them? I think we should listen to their ideas, but we have those ideas, they're written down. I would have a really hard time listening to Thomas Jefferson. I think that if he reappeared today, we might not like him very much. Similarly, we wouldn't like the fact that so many of them are so young. Right now, people tend to gravitate toward older Americans and somehow think that they have the mantle of wisdom on their shoulders. And let me tell you, I'm older. Wisdom's a great thing, but so is the enthusiasm and the new ideas of youth. So should we listen to them? I think we should listen to their principles, but that we should not listen to their mechanics is what I would say. And I think if they looked at where we are right now, first of all, they simply wouldn't be able to function. They would all curl up in a ball because the world is so alien to them. And because they wouldn't be able to get with the program, if you will. It's tiring to learn all this stuff. I was laughing the other day, somebody was talking about, what a brilliant strategy it was for me to develop my brand by doing these Facebook talks. If you remember when we started these, I literally did this because I had to learn to broadcast in order to teach during a pandemic. And I knew that everybody was as bored as I was at home, and I was just trying to entertain people. I wasn't marketing a brand or doing anything else. I was just talking to my friends. And I couldn't have done this a year ago. This is brand new. And let me tell you, I'm tired from learning all this new technology, and I'm sure you're tired as well from doing it, and the founders would feel the exact same way. But that does raise the question of where we are right now. Back to the question that somebody just asked, is this an unusually weird time in American history? Yes. Yes, we have seen much of what we are living through right now. We have seen before. We have seen the extreme polarization. That 1850s, 1800 for that matter, 1850s, 1890s, 1920s. We've seen it before, and I can tell you how we got over it in those times. We have certainly seen the belief that certain people shouldn't vote before. Again, 1830s, 1850s, 1880s, 1890s, 1920s. We've had plenty of times in America where the vote has been suppressed so that one party or another could essentially have one party rule. And it's happened with both parties. We have had times when we have had Congresses that seem to do nothing. The do nothing Congress, the first one was Harry Truman, of course, who complained bitterly about his, but we had it as well in the 1850s when the Southern Democrats refused to let the Congress do anything except protect human enslavement and deliver the mails, basically, and have a standing army on the Western frontier. So there are pieces of everything that we have had before, and we've certainly had hapless presidents. I mean, if you're looking for a parallel to Donald Trump, look no further than Andrew Johnson after the Civil War, who called for war on the Congress himself, or look back to James Buchanan, who in the transition between him and Lincoln literally let the country be torn apart. and sat there and said, well, the southern states aren't allowed to do this, but I don't have the power to stop them. So, toodaloo. I mean, it was insane at the time, and people talked about impeaching him at the time. So we've certainly had hapless presidents, but what we have never had before is a major political party that bought into this anti-democratic trend. We have never before had a major political party that literally tried to overturn the results of a legitimate election. That has never happened before. And it has really frightening potential to attack the very foundations of our democracy. When you have legislators like the 200 Republicans in Congress and in the Senate who refuse to recognize that a Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, was legally elected and that is not in doubt. And when they are deliberately trying to whip up their supporters to believe that there was something untoward about an election that, in fact, Republican people who ran the elections say is wrong, that they say that election was clean, then you've got a real problem. You've got an attack on our democratic system altogether. And that has never happened before. And certainly we have never had a president who refused to recognize the legitimate vote of the American people. Even up to the point where in 1888, the incumbent president, Grover Cleveland, was reelected by a majority of about 100,000 votes, which is a lot in 1888. And yet, because the Republican challenger, Benjamin Harrison, was elected in the Electoral College by the votes of New York, which were probably illegally switched, to be honest. I'm not going to make that argument today here. Nonetheless, Grover Cleveland looked at what had happened. He lost in the Electoral College, even though he won the popular vote, and he moved out of the White House. It wasn't just a question of sort of saying, okay, yeah, I didn't win. He literally was the incumbent, and he moved out of the White House. And then he ran again and won by such a landslide, he got to move back into the White House. But the Republicans made sure to trash his presidency before he entered it. And this is why Grover Cleveland has not gone down in history as one of our greater presidents. He was, in fact, in many ways, a great president. But so we are, in fact, at a crazy time. But that crazy time offers us incredible opportunities. And that is, I'm going to end where I started today. And that is when I said to you, stop reacting to people like Paxton, because he's playing a game that we don't have to play. Where we are is in this moment where we have a major party that is not responding to the will of the people, even within its own party. Literally, Trump is turning on people like Brad Raffensperger, who's a Secretary of State in Georgia, who has said the vote was clean. Listen, I donated to Trump. I voted for Trump. My guy lost. We need to bow to the law. They've turned against him. They've turned against Brian Kemp, a Republican in Georgia, the governor of Georgia, who has refused to overturn the election there. They've turned against Doug Ducey in Arizona, a Republican who once again has said, I do not have the authority to overturn the will of the people. What we have with this split, even in the Republican Party, is an opportunity for ordinary Americans like you and me to stand up and say, no, this is what we want out of democracy. It's our government. This is what the founders built. They built a democracy in which people, ordinary people, have the right to have a say about how we want to be governed. And crucially, in 2020, those ordinary people include people of color, people of different abilities, people of different wealth, people of different genders, people of different races and ethnicities. And we are the ones who get to recreate a society and recreate American democracy as a multicultural American democracy that once and for all gets rid of the idea that in order to have a democracy, it's got to be dominated by white men. And that's scary for a lot of people. I get that. I totally get that it's scary for a lot of people, but it's also really exciting. America has always been at its best when we did include everybody's voices, when we did figure out that, some, Hispanic kid is the one who's going to figure out how to do, 6G technology, when we looked at what people could do rather than what they looked like. And that moment that we're in And that idea of trying to recreate and reclaim American democracy is really, at the end of the day, up to us. It's up to ordinary Americans demanding what we want from our government. And the minute that you start to think that we have to do what Paxton says in his fevered moments when he's hoping for a presidential pardon, is the moment that you give up the power of democracy. And the one thing I would add to that is that this is a lesson. It's interesting because it's a lesson that I think it's a lot harder in many ways for people who've always had stuff to hear, because they're used to the system sort of being rigged for them. But it's not something that's hard for people who have not been part of that rigged system to hear. They know that you have to work to get what you want, and we have to work to get democracy. Now, one of the things that I would finally leave you with is, if I got to choose the things that we would start with as a baseline for rejuvenating American democracy, I literally would start with the rule of law. The law has to be the same for everybody in America, regardless of who you are, whether you're the president or whether you're the homeless person lying outside of the White House. The law has to be the same for everybody, because once we lose that, we lose everything else. So if in fact people are with me with the idea of reclaiming American democracy, I'm going to put in my pitch for that being the very first article of things that we return to our new vision of the world. And we can build on that from there. But I guess at the end of the day, once again, somebody just said to me, I just did something, and somebody said, I don't understand why you're so hopeful. And I said, what else do people who live in a democracy have but each other? And I think that that's one thing that the last 4 years have taught us, is that we really do have each other, and that there's a lot of us. And if we weren't powerful, they wouldn't be trying so hard to make sure that we don't get to have a say. So on that cheery note, I'm going to leave you for now. My last day of teaching for the semester is tomorrow, and then I'm going to have I guess about 6 weeks to kind of regroup, catch my breath, and help figure out where we're going from here. And I really am thrilled to be on this journey with you all, because it's an exciting place to be. Thanks for being here. I will see you on Thursday, when I will take up Reconstruction again. And I'll see you later on tonight, when there is an unfortunately large amount of stuff to write about. Thanks for being here.